But let's take you back to nearly a week ago and how Nhlanhla Nene actually got into this position. ENCA's Aaron Bates joins us now for some background. Aaron, with the benefit of hindsight, it almost looks as if once Nhlanhla Nene was at that State Capture Commission of Inquiry, there was also incredible work being done by investigative journalists that almost added to the moment that has brought us here. But remind us again what happened last week, Wednesday.
So on the 3rd of October, Nhlanhla Nene testified under oath at the State Capture Inquiry. And in fact, yesterday, a colleague of ours asked me, when was the moment he disclosed those Gupta meetings? And what's interesting, Kathy, is there isn't a moment. In his written submissions, he clearly stipulates around 8 meetings between 2010 and 2014. But he doesn't off the bat disclose that in the inquiry. It's around 45 minutes of having that information sort of eked out of him by the head of the legal team, Paul Pretorius, the advocate. And so we went back through those roughly 45 minutes to try and get a sense of what he actually said about meeting the Guptas. And what's essential there, which the president himself has underlined in his diction when he said Nene has not been found guilty, is that at this point there's no evidence before the inquiry or before a court of law proving that those very many meetings that happened even after there was all of this doubt from Nene about Estina and, of course, the Guptagate scandal, there's no empirical proof at this point that those meetings led to undue influence. And that, of course, is the big implication, possibly, but we just don't know at this point what fruit those meetings with RJ Gupta bore.
I suppose, Aaron, what really took the story to the next level was the investigative reports around what happened when he was Deputy Finance Minister and part of that chairperson of that PIC board and the decisions that were there. That's almost part of what gave credibility to any aspersions around what may have happened with the Guptas, because in as much as we don't know that, certainly this information did not do the situation any good.
It didn't. And again, it raises all of these questions. There's this cloud of doubt around his choices and the decisions he may have made around his son and this money, these millions of dollars that went to his son's business partner into this very opaque account sitting in the Emirati states. But again, we don't know what did or did not Nene do in order to perhaps facilitate some kind of preferential treatment for his son's business partner. We don't have any answers on that at this point. But what those investigative reports in the Mail and Guardian last Friday also indicated, which I found really interesting, Kathy, was on the 5th page, in addition to that PIC expose, which it seems was weeks, if not months in the making, lots of, financial reports and the like being delved into by Amabungane. There was an additional report on page 5 about Nene's son meeting with Eric Wood. And Eric Wood was a deal maker for the Guptas. And at one point, he was in discussions with Wood about possibly buying a Gupta coal mine. And from that, even though the deal never happened, it suggests that the Guptas may have been trying to turn Nene's son into a Duduzane Zuma mini-me. And so certainly that report, in addition to the PIC report you've referred to, raises questions. The problem now is we have these cloud of questions. There isn't evidence before the inquiry at this point to clarify what precisely are the allegations on what Nene did to benefit the Guptas, which is the insinuation about all of these several meetings, and what did he do while he was Deputy Finance Minister and, a non-executive chair of the PIC that gave undue influence to that family. There are no answers on that point. It's just a massive and significant cloud of doubt and scrutiny.
And certainly the fact that we had him on record lying about having met the Guptas certainly made the situation worse. There are other ministers who have publicly acknowledged and admitted that they've met the Guptas, even though not in their official capacity. One wonders exactly what that means. But when it comes to now what happens to the rest of cabinet, there was something else that was important that came out of Nene's testimony, especially when it came to the nuclear deal.
Yes.
He confirmed that all of cabinet had approved that deal. Now, what do we know? Have we made any headway in terms of who attended that meeting? And when he said cabinet approved that meeting, Who are the individuals that
Yes.
that includes? Because that process also becomes important going forward if this indeed is to be the standard by which public officials are held accountable.
Yes, and Ramaphosa himself saying there no one is beyond scrutiny. Well, who was in cabinet at the time? It included Ramaphosa. The question is difficult to answer, and the declassified minutes that were adjoined to Nene's written submissions were actually issued to the press by the inquiry. I went through them, Kathy. They include several names at the top of people who were present when these minutes were taken, but the actual chapter or the paragraph dealing with Cabinet's approval for the nuclear deal just says Cabinet. What's significant is that the same declassified documents indicate that Cabinet had taken a decision to not publicly disclose the worst case scenario on the nuclear deal funding. They'd made a determination that they were only going to communicate the best estimate of how much this deal was going to cost, and that estimate was based on out-of-date predictions on foreign exchange. So you're right to remind us of the nuclear deal, and it's important because it's getting lost in all of this storm around the security, the stability of the finance minister position. We don't know who the cabinet ministers are individually. We know that that declassified minutes document shows cabinet, and hopefully we will get further clarity in the inquiry.
Let me take you back, Aaron, to what you say you found in these documents. Are you saying that those papers show that cabinet collectively agreed to mislead the South African public about the costs of the nuclear deal, which is part of why we are here today?
Yes, that is the determination in the actual papers. And what's also significant, Kathy, is that when those papers were issued, we actually put together screen grabs of the very clauses in that document that show that. There's also another worrying clause in that declassified document of Cabinet minutes from December of 2015, which indicates that Cabinet thought there was no constitutional concern over this nuclear deal, which was being steamrolled through Parliament just before the end of that calendar year, right before some important budgetary decisions needed to be made, is that they didn't have all the financial reports they needed to lawfully and regularly make the decision. And yet they steamrolled it through and thought there was no constitutional problem with what they were doing. It simply says Cabinet. So the insinuation on my reading is that it's collectively Cabinet. And there are very serious questions that haven't been answered. One, on who exactly took that decision and why. And two, why after those documents were released to the media last week, they were then recalled. We were told we shouldn't actually show the screen grabs themselves of this proven printed document declassified by the presidency that indicates this very problematic, irregular decision to pass through what I've called an outrageous nuclear deal.
And of course, Aaron, this conversation brings us back to today, in that we have the president calling on everybody to give the state capture inquiry the information that it needs in order to investigate the full extent of state capture that we have witnessed in the country. What happens to those ministers then? Who is there cause at this point, Aaron, for an argument to be made that every minister and deputy minister that served under the Jacob Zuma administration should in fact be called to testify before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry?
Well, Kathy, if that happens, we will be here not until Christmas. We'll be here until the end of the century. I mean, it's quite possible that that would be a very good and effective way of getting to the bottom of things, as Ramaphosa has said we need to do. And funny you should talk about, who in cabinet was steamrolling, as I've put it, the nuclear deal. I saw a photograph that said, if everyone who went to tea with the Guptas was called before the inquiry, this is what it would look like. And the photo is literally two people, I think, from the IFP, sitting in an empty, vacant parliament. But it does raise an important question. Does having tea with the Guptas by default implicate you in wrongdoing? Maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't. Why was Nene having all of these meetings, especially after he himself said he was concerned about Estina, his own treasury was investigating it, and of course Guptagate had happened. So it's a bit disingenuous to say, well, I didn't really think there was anything suspicious going on and I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. Clearly there was undue influence going on when they landed at an Air Force base. So we're going to see a lot more coming out of the inquiry. I don't know if we're going to see every minister from Zuma's administration.
All right, Aaron. Well, the story is certainly, it's moved at such a fast pace that, it's almost unbelievable that all of these events have happened within the course of a week. But certainly, many have criticized the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, but the information that it's revealing so far has certainly been worthwhile for the South African public to know. And who knows, maybe more ministers will fall on their sword, especially those that I think, at least by way of court judgments, really deserve to.